It's very hard to provide a positive perspective. Investment has been too low. The German economy is a very diversified economy, and it needs attractive framework conditions, so reduced bureaucracy, reduced regulation, and a lower tax burden to flourish.
What's going on with the German economy? Why is it still in such bad shape? And what will it take to get things going again? Well, Clemens Fuest is president of the Ifo Institute in Munich, and he joins me now for more. Clemens, welcome. Your monthly survey of business sentiment here in Germany actually showed a slight improvement for this month, and that for the first time in 4 months. Can we say that something positive is finally happening here?
Well, this stabilization is clearly positive. It's a good sign. Is it a change in trend? I guess that's too early to say. So we'd have to see if that continues in the months to come. But companies do tell us that for the next 6 months, they at least don't expect the situation to worsen further. And companies, especially in the service sector, are telling us things are improving. The current situation has also improved. So overall, I guess that's a good sign.
This is an economy that many would say is still in crisis, while economies around it seem to be doing better. What's going on exactly?
There are particular issues in Germany. Germany is very much exposed to rising energy prices. So the energy-intensive industry, like the chemical industry, is strong in Germany. Then we have issues in the car industry, the transition towards electric mobility, the growing importance of IT, the difficulties in the Chinese markets. All of that is making life difficult for the car industry. And a shrinking car industry is a strong headwind for the German economy. On top of that, we have other issues like a very particular energy policy, shutting down nuclear plants, raising the price of energy. And we have the issue of demographic change and labor shortages. So a lot of investors seem to think it's better to invest elsewhere because we will have trouble finding employees.
That's a lot of different problems. Some of them are more structural in nature. Do we have any sense of what it will take to put this economy back on the right path?
I guess what it would take is, first of all, a more positive international environment. A lot will depend on the US elections. A lot will depend on how the Chinese economy continues, the Chinese government's plans to introduce a stimulus program that might help German exports. And then, of course, there is the issue of domestic politics. We currently have a government that finds it very difficult to agree on measures to address the challenges. And we need a government that does find agreement and acts decisively. There's a lot of uncertainty created by this political disagreement at the moment, and that would have to change.
The German government comprised of 3 different parties, each with very different views on the direction, as you mentioned, that the economy should take, or at least economic help should take. As an economist, how do you view that issue? We have one side that says that there needs to be more subsidies, more help for companies. We have another side that says there needs to be better sort of framework conditions in the country, including a lower tax burden, for example. How do you see it?
I think the recent experience with subsidy programs tells us that with a subsidy policy targeted at individual companies or sectors, it's very hard to provide a positive perspective. The German economy is a very diversified economy, and it needs attractive framework conditions, so reduced bureaucracy, reduced regulation, and a lower tax burden to flourish. So I think subsidy policies are appropriate in certain areas and for certain purposes, but to get a better perspective for the economy as a whole, yes, we would need a stronger focus on general framework conditions, no doubt.
There's another political debate about infrastructure spending. And while we don't want to drag you into too much politics, how do you see this as an economist? Would Germany benefit in the long run from an improvement or a focus on certain kinds of infrastructure?
There are significant issues with German infrastructure, no doubt about that. The infrastructure has been good traditionally in Germany, but it has been neglected in the last 10 years or so. our governments have very much focused on consumption spending. That means expanding the welfare state, and they haven't used the money enough to channel it into investment. So our infrastructure does need more investment, and it also needs smart investment, in particular investment that doesn't interrupt traffic flows too much. We see that currently investment which is taking place in the rail network, in the road network, is run in a way that interrupts traffic flows, and that has a high economic cost. So we need more investment in infrastructure, and we need it managed in a smart way.
That debate over investment spending is often tied toward taking on debt. Germany, somewhat unique among large economies in its reluctance to take on new debt. In fact, it's anchored in the German constitution that there are certain restrictions on taking on debt. This is, again, a big political debate right now in the country. As an economist, again, how should we look at this debt issue?
I think if we just loosen fiscal rules, the result will be more consumption spending, not necessarily more investment. So debt is not the same as public investment. At the same time, we are an almost fully employed economy, and that also means we need to redirect resources rather than just increasing spending by incurring more debt. I think something like a two-step fiscal policy would be good. First step, reallocate consumption spending, public consumption spending, towards more investment. And then as a second step, I think some element of debt financing would be reasonable. But the first step is the more painful one, and that should be taken first.
You mentioned the political bottleneck right now, three parties that cannot agree on a common direction. You also talked about some of the outside circumstances that could change to even benefit the German economy, such as, for example, stimulus program in China. What about the recent loosening of fiscal regulations here, or the fiscal environment, I should say, here in Europe, with lowering of interest rates? Could that benefit this economy if that trend continues?
That would support the economy, especially the German economy. If we look at inflation rates and the inflation dynamics in Germany and the monetary policy environment, I think for Germany, another interest rate cut by the ECB would be appropriate. But of course, the ECB looks at the Eurozone as a whole. And in the Eurozone as a whole, there are also upward risks for inflation, in particular prices in the service sector. So that's why my expectation would be that the ECB may be reluctant to reduce interest rates further very quickly because it has to take into account these price pressures. For Germany alone, further interest rate cuts would help. What we've seen until today is already priced in. So the extent to which that supports the economy is limited.
Would you argue that this inflation crisis is pretty much behind us now?
I would think, yes, it is behind us. We see this in our surveys as well, where if we ask companies, do you have difficulties in your supply chains, difficulties with the supply of intermediate products, this number is down to something like 10%. 2 years ago, it was close to 80%. So the supply crisis that has been driving inflation is over, and energy prices have also come down. There may be future energy price shocks, for instance, in the case of an escalation of the wars in Israel, Iran, but if that doesn't come, I think the inflation crisis is over.
And I have to ask you, what makes you optimistic about the months ahead when you look at this economy?
I guess the hope is that private consumption may be a stabilizing factor. Wages are increasing, real wages are increasing, but that so far hasn't translated into more consumption demand, and that may be coming along. Of course, for that to happen, we need better consumer confidence. And here, a more united government doing the right things would help.
Fair to say, then, we'll have more of a tougher time before times get better in the coming months?
I think that may happen. That's correct.
All right, Clemens Fuest is president of the Ifo Institute in Munich. Thank you very much.